I really like the idea of being able to graph the structure of a story, at least in theory. Structure I like because it lets me divide a story up into manageable chunks, rather than having to try to take it all on at once. And of course, having distinct sections also benefits the reader. It means that different parts of the story will feel different and have different kinds of action, and that keeps things fresh and interesting as they move through the plot. And I think it would be nice to be able to put it on a graph, because it would make all of that complex information easily visually accessible at a single glance. So why is it that when I look up images of story structure graph, I basically get a bunch of variations on the same thing? That thing is Freytag's pyramid here. It's named after a German playwright by the name of Gustav Freytag, who invented it to describe the plots of dramas for the stage in his own time. Based on my little bit of research that I did into it, it's actually a pretty complex and interesting set of ideas, but as with many things, it seems to have gotten flattened and simplified and mutated over time as it was applied to more and more different kinds of story structure. Rather than being a nice pointy triangle like this, it stretches out, giving us a really long rising action and a very short falling action. Now, in the modern usages, this is graphing tension on the y-axis. That is to say that it's showing us the intensity of the reader's anticipation for what's going to happen next in the story. And tension is the key to understanding why this shape is so popular as a method for structuring a story. As long as the reader continues to anticipate more and more the next thing that's going to happen, they're going to keep paying attention to your story. And the more invested they are in the long term, probably the more likely they will be to watch the next movie or buy the next book, which makes this a profitable story structure if nothing else. For that reason, this particular structure of tension is present in a whole bunch of modern fiction. But the popularity of this model of tension is also how I know that it's not terribly useful from a writer's perspective. So many stories make use of it, and yet all of those stories are still distinct and different. That indicates to me that the tension structure itself is not what makes those stories unique or interesting. After all, people who study story structure in the abstract are usually looking for something universal, a truth that applies to every single story out there. But from a writer's perspective, what makes your story interesting is usually what's unique to it, what makes it different from the other things that you've read. So why don't we try to structure our story based on that, based on what's unique to it? Structuring a story, that is to say dividing it into distinct sections, only requires that something changes over the course of the story, so that we can look at one section and see that it's different in some way from the next. So we're graphing changes here, and if we want to put them on the y-axis, they should probably be linear changes. You should be able to see clearly whether something is increasing or decreasing, whether it's moving in one direction or the other. In practice, those axes of change could be almost anything. It could be how close the protagonist is to achieving a goal. It could be how dry the climate of the setting is. Maybe it's the stability of a romantic relationship, or even the strength of an army. So long as it's something that affects the plot, dictates what kinds of events can occur at a certain point in the story, or changes the atmosphere or mood of the story, it's worth graphing. For example, let's say that we have a story set on an icy planet. One of our axes could be the freeze-thaw cycle. At the top of the y-axis, the land and the sea are frozen, and at the bottom, they are not. Our story could take us through 2 cycles of the seasons, of freeze and thaw. Another change we track here can be whether our protagonist is on the sea or on the land. Let's have them start out at sea, then travel to the land, then back out to sea again. This way we'll get to see both land and sea, both frozen and thawed. Now we need some stakes. We'll graph how close our protagonist is to their chosen goal, which in this case could be rescuing somebody they care about. They'll slowly get closer, then something will go wrong and they'll lose the advantage. But eventually they'll get it back and succeed in the mission. So you might be wondering, how do these lines on this graph help us actually structure a story? Let's take a closer look at our graph and pick out some of the points where those lines change their trajectory or behave in an interesting way. First, we have a point where the frozen ocean begins to thaw. We are already making progress toward the rescue but haven't gotten to land yet, so the mission is probably still in sort of a planning phase. Maybe our protagonist is trying to convince other people to help them at this moment. Now we have a journey from the sea to the land. We arrive just as the sea has thawed. The protagonists got here by crossing the ice. so they probably have no way back until the ocean freezes again. Next, we'll have a moment where the rescue mission goes wrong. Perhaps one of the allies that they recruited before leaving has betrayed them. Now the protagonists have been captured by their enemies, so they're farther away from succeeding in their rescue mission than ever before. But when the season is at its coldest, they start making progress toward the rescue again. I'll say that they save one of their captor's children from freezing to death in the snow, and thus gain an ally on the inside. Then we have a section where their progress toward the rescue rapidly increases to the point of success. Simultaneously, the world is thawing again. I can see a tense sequence of sneaking out of the fortress, then racing across the thinning ice while the enemy pursues them. Just as they're about to be caught, they can break the ice behind them, and the pursuers will be swallowed by the sea. And finally, they reach the place that they started from, their home, and the rescue mission is complete. If we want, we can also compare the graph we've made here to Freytag's pyramid from earlier, and see if the tension arc lines up. The section up until that final frantic escape would all be rising action. Although capture would be a setback to the protagonists' goals, a dip in their fortunes, so to speak, it still raises the stakes. The climax would be just before the protagonists break the ice and secure their escape. And we would have some very quick falling action as they return home. So, in this case, it is the same old arc of tension after all. But with this more complex graph, we get a great deal more information about the specific content of this story. In fact, I came up with most of the plot while I was actually drawing the graph. I started with the idea of a frozen world, but I had no idea what would actually happen there until I put the lines down. The interplay between them gave me enough ideas to fill in some of the gaps. That's all I have to say this time, so thanks for watching. I hope you try out this method for yourself, and I hope it is useful to you. If you like it, remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks.